You think you escaped it until it shows up in the mirror, in your dreams, in your children's drawings. We begin with the illusion of safety, junk food, best friends, no school tomorrow. But in the woods behind a luxury home, 4 boys find a rotting cabin and a nightmare carved in blood. 1 door separated them from death, and 1 scream changed their lives forever. It was supposed to be one of those nights we talk about for years. No school the next day, junk food, gaming, and the kind of crude humor only a group of 11-year-old boys could find funny. John's house wasn't just big, it was legendary. 3 stories, an in-home arcade, a massive basement with a screen the size of a movie theater, and a forest in the backyard that felt like it belonged in a different state. I got there around 5. David, Tucker and I brought our sleeping bags and controllers, while John had snacks piled high in his kitchen, as if he were preparing for the apocalypse. Eventually, we wandered outside to this wooden fort John had built in the trees. It was just before sunset, and the sky was that burnt orange color that makes everything look haunted, even when it isn't. We were up in the fort messing around when Tucker went dead silent. He whispered, "Did you hear that?" I listened. There it was, a faint crunch of leaves. 1 step, then another. Too slow to be a deer, too heavy for a raccoon. I glanced at John and David. They looked confused until they heard it too. John didn't hesitate. He pulled out his phone and called his dad, who was inside the house. 10 minutes later, his dad showed up with a flashlight and led us back, checking the woods the whole way. We didn't see anyone, no animal, no person. Just that sound still echoing in my head. Back in the basement, we started playing Fortnite and tried to forget it. Then John mentioned something that shifted the entire night. "You guys know there's a cabin out there, right? Some older kid told me it's sketchy as hell." We were 11. The word sketchy might as well have been a dare. And like the idiots we were, we grabbed flashlights, threw on hoodies, and headed into the woods. The deeper we went, the quieter everything got. The forest just swallowed sound. It took about 10 minutes before we saw it. The cabin. It wasn't big, but it looked wrong. The boards were blackened, the roof sagged in places, and something reeked. It smelled like death, thick and sour, the kind of smell that sticks in your throat. 1 window was shattered, so we naturally climbed through it. We split up inside. Tucker and I took the left hallway, while John and David took the right one. The place felt stale, like it had been sealed up for years. The walls were stained, the furniture overturned or broken. We found a small room with a broken dresser and a bed frame with no mattress. An attic door was built into the ceiling above us, the kind that pulls down with a string. I remember Tucker staring at it for a long time, as if it were watching him back. I was about to tell him we should leave when the air shifted. I don't know how else to explain it. The temperature dropped, like instantly. The kind of cold that creeps through your clothes and into your bones. My flashlight flickered for a second, and in that flicker, I thought I saw something behind the door. But when I swung the light back, nothing was there. And then John screamed. Not like a prank scream, a real one. The kind that makes your blood freeze before your brain catches up. We bolted toward it, and before we even reached them, John and David were already sprinting toward the window, their faces pale. We didn't ask questions, we just followed. Back at the house, it took John a full 10 minutes to speak. There was a guy in there, he said, barely above a whisper. He was tall, skinny, like real skinny, just standing there. Then he lunged at us. My stomach dropped. Then he added, there was someone else lying on the floor in that room. I think they were dead. There was blood, a lot of it. None of us knew what to say. Tucker looked like he might puke. David wanted to call the cops. I couldn't stop thinking about the room we were in, the attic above us, and the smell. Something in that place had been rotting. John's dad was pissed, naturally, but when he heard what John said, his face changed. He didn't yell. He just went quiet and called the police. They arrived quickly. 10 state troopers, dogs, and flashlights. We watched from John's upstairs window as they surrounded the cabin and went in. 20 minutes later, one of them threw up in the bushes. When they came back out, they weren't the same. One officer went to the house to talk to John's dad, and I only heard part of it. There was a man inside, mid-40s, just like John said, covered in blood, alive but barely responsive. Near him was a corpse, someone who'd been dead for days. They found a foot-long knife, and then they found the closet. In the very room Tucker and I had been exploring, just feet from us. They found 3 more bodies, all stabbed, all decomposing. We were that close. Tucker cried when he heard. I didn't sleep for a week. I kept thinking about that attic door and what might have been up there just out of reach. None of us talked much after that night. I don't think we ever hung out, all 4 of us, again. We never learned who the victims were, just that they weren't from around here. But every time I walk past a forest now and hear leaves crunch underfoot, I still freeze. Because sometimes the monster isn't in your head. Sometimes it's just one door away. But some screams are never heard. Buried under the thunder of bombs, the silence after destruction can be even louder. And for one family, escaping the flames was only the beginning, because something else walked out with them. We weren't supposed to be in that house. It didn't belong to us, and none of us felt comfortable in it. The wallpaper peeled like old skin. The windows were cloudy and crooked in their frames. You could still smell the family who had lived there, stew spices and cigarette ash, and something faintly floral that clung to the curtains, long after they'd fled or died or disappeared. But we didn't care. It had walls, a roof, and a door that closed. That was enough. It was my sister, Rana, her 3 kids, and my younger brother, Imad. He could barely walk even before the war, but he never complained. We were the only ones left of our family. We had 3 days of silence. Then came the shelling. The sound is always worse than you expect, like the sky is being ripped open. The first one hit 2 streets over. A long, thunderous rumble followed by shattering glass. I grabbed the kids and pushed them down, just as the second one hit. This one was closer. The floor shook so hard I thought it was caving in. Dust sprayed from the ceiling. Screams outside, then inside, then silence. For a second, a complete unnatural silence. No birds, no bombs, no voices. Just the ringing in my ears. Then I saw the heat ripple through the room like a wave of fire. It passed beside me, not on me, but close enough that my shirt stuck to my back, soaked in sweat. And that's when I saw Rana's kids, huddled by the overturned couch, faces pale, lips trembling. I don't remember deciding. I just moved. I carried them one by one through the back hallway. Smoke filled the rooms like breath from something too large to see. I kept my face low, eyes burning. I kicked a door open, saw light, and stumbled out. Imad was already outside somehow, bleeding from the legs, standing like a statue, holding Rana upright. I don't know when she was hit. Maybe inside. Maybe when we ran, her arm was limp, but her eyes locked on mine like they were keeping me from falling apart. We made it. Alive, shaking, burned, scraped up with glass and shrapnel, but alive. And then the dream started. The first night in the shelter, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the hallway again, but in reverse, as if I was walking back into the smoke, not away from it. The walls were longer, stretching endlessly, and there was something behind me. I couldn't hear it. I couldn't see it, but I knew it was there, watching. After the third night, I stopped talking about it. Everyone else was dealing with their nightmares. Rana barely spoke. Her youngest, Amal, started chewing her nails until they bled. The baby screamed at shadows. And Imad, he smiled too much, as if he were pretending none of it had happened. That scared me the most. Then I started hearing it while awake. It began like static, a faint buzzing, like the silence after a bomb, that ringing that never leaves. But this was different. It grew louder in certain rooms. It moved. Once, in the middle of the night, I followed it. I left the cot and crossed the shelter hall. And when I opened the door to the bathroom, the lights flickered. There was nothing there, except that the mirror was fogged over. And when I wiped it clean, I saw behind me a figure, too tall, head tilted, arms wrong. But when I turned, the room was empty. I didn't tell anyone. We moved shelters again after 2 weeks, then again, then again. It didn't matter. Wherever we went, I saw it. Not directly, never full on. Just in corners, in puddles, reflections. Once, looking out into the darkness through a bus window, I saw it walking behind us. Not toward us, just behind. I kept telling myself it was trauma. The brain does weird things when it's broken, but that didn't explain the drawings. Amal had started sketching on scraps of cardboard and newspaper, always the same shape. A man without a face, standing in smoke. Sometimes she drew herself holding my hand, and behind us, in pencil darker than the rest, stood the same thing. One night, I asked her why she kept drawing it. She looked up and said, "Because he followed us out." I felt cold in my stomach, like I'd swallowed ice water. "What do you mean?" I asked. "He lived in the house," she whispered, "but he was trapped. When the walls broke, he came out with us." That night I checked her for a fever. She had none. We tried to throw the drawings away. They came back. Not literally, not floating in the air or anything, but she drew new ones, almost identical, even after we took away the pencils. Imad began muttering in his sleep. One night, I heard him repeating something over and over. It wasn't ours. We took what wasn't ours. It wasn't ours. We brought it with us. Over and over. I shook him awake. He looked at me blankly. Didn't remember a thing. And Rana. Rana started locking the door at night. Not the front door, the bedroom door, from the inside. Even though we were safe, or as safe as one could be, I asked her why, and she said, "There's something in the hallway. I hear it pacing." When I pressed further, she broke down in tears. We all tried not to sleep, until one night, the smoke came back. It was during a power outage. We lit candles. The kids were asleep. Rana had finally passed out beside them. I was on watch, staring out the window, and then I smelled it. Not candle smoke, but the thick, choking kind. The kind that coats your lungs and clings to your clothes. I turned. A shape moved slowly through the hallway, its head too low, as if it were crouching. I froze. I couldn't even call for Imad. I stepped into the hallway. The air was thick. The walls were rippling like heat waves. I blinked. My skin felt prickly. And then I saw it. Standing where the front door used to be in that first house. Except this wasn't that house. This was the new shelter. And somehow, it brought the door with it. The figure didn't move, just stared. If it had eyes and raised a hand, there were too many fingers. The smoke poured from its open palm like a second breath. I ran to the kids' room. I slammed the door shut. I held it shut until morning. When I opened the door again, the hallway was clear. But every photo in the room had turned black and not burnt. Just blank. We left the next day, but it came with us again. Sometimes I hear it late at night, coughing, not like a person, more like something learning how to imitate one. And sometimes I wake up to find soot under my fingernails, or see tiny handprints on the window glass, even when no one's touched it. I don't know what it is. Perhaps a memory so vivid it became a reality. Maybe the house was cursed. Possibly we were just the ones who stayed too long, breathed too much of that air, and it made a home in us. All I know is this. We got out alive, but not alone. And I'm starting to think it didn't follow us. We followed it. Not everything that follows you is smoke and shadow. Some evils are flesh and bone, passed down, inherited like a name or a scar. And sometimes they wear the face of someone you once loved. I always believed my grandmother, even when no one else in the family did. In 1956, she was 28 years old, living on a worn-out farmstead in northern Alabama. My mother wasn't born yet, but my aunt was just 2, still sleeping in a crib. My grandfather was an older man, already in his 40s at the time. A man with cold fists and colder eyes. They were brown, so dark they looked black. And when he got angry, those eyes would swell with hate like something had slipped out from underneath his skin. He drank every night, wasted his pay at the bar, and sometimes brought back the smell of cheap perfume and lipstick stains on his undershirt. He'd yell about dinner being cold, or her spending too much time rocking the baby. Then he'd take it out on her, his belt, his fists, his mouth. And still, she stayed. She used to tell me, I could live with a drunk. I could even live with a bastard, but I couldn't live with something I didn't understand. That something was his hunting trips. Once a month, always on a Friday, just before midnight, he'd leave the house in his thick wool coat, boots laced to his knees, and disappear into the woods. No game, no meat. Just hours later, at dawn, he'd come back with a calmness that felt alien. He'd hold her hand, He'd kiss my aunt's forehead. He'd sit on the porch and hum old love songs. It never lasted past Monday, but for those 2 days, he was the man she'd married, not the beast she feared. But 2 months before my mother was born, he changed. He came home one night, stinking of gin, and when she told him she was leaving him, with the full support of her family, he pulled out a revolver and fired. The bullet missed her by inches, chipping the post she leaned against. He didn't say a word. He just stood there, shaking, before running out the door. 2 days later, they found rat poison in the well, enough to kill them all, including his daughter. He had poisoned the water they drank, the same water she boiled for her baby's milk. He disappeared for nearly a week. Then, that Friday night, he came bursting through the bedroom door like the house was on fire. She was half asleep, belly round with my mother. She thought he'd come to finish the job, but he looked terrified. "It's almost time," he mumbled, fumbling for his gear. "Time for what?" she asked, holding the baby close. He didn't answer. Just threw on his coat and boots and ran out the door. He forgot one thing, the double-barrel shotgun that always went with him. She laughed, in disbelief more than anything. This monster had tried to kill her twice, and now he was running into the woods empty-handed, like some scared child. She locked every door except the front, sat in her rocking chair with the shotgun across her lap, and watched the moon rise. At 12:30 a.m., she heard it, a howl, far off, like dogs fighting. At 12:45 a.m., another, closer, stronger. The baby stirred. "Oh Lord, I hope it's not wild dogs messing with the chickens," she whispered, rocking the crib gently. Then came 12:55 a.m. This time the howl wasn't distant. It rattled the windows. It vibrated her bones. She shot up and pressed her hand to her belly. Outside, something slammed against the kitchen door. Then a growl so deep it made her teeth buzz. She didn't hesitate. She picked up the shotgun, kissed her toddler's head, whispered to her unborn child, and stepped into the hallway. The thing inside was tearing apart the kitchen, plates shattering, wood splintering, claws scraping across the floor. It growled again, low and throaty, something primal. She edged toward the door, slowly, carefully. When she reached it, she slipped the barrel through the crack first, then leaned in, just enough to see. And there it was. 7 feet tall, hunched over the sugar jar it had knocked to the floor. Thick red fur, long arms, clawed feet. It wasn't fully wolf, but not entirely human either. Its snout twitched as it licked the floor, and then it froze. It turned its head. She saw its eyes. She would never forget the eyes. They were brown, so dark they looked black, full of hatred, full of recognition. Her finger tightened on the trigger, but she didn't shoot. Not out of fear, but shock. In a blur, the beast burst out of the back door faster than anything she'd ever seen. By the time she got outside, it was gone. She locked the house and sat in the rocking chair, waiting for daylight with the shotgun in her arms. He came home at sunrise. His clothes were torn. His boots are missing. His face was scratched like he'd crawled through thorns. He didn't say a word, just walked to the crib, kissed his daughter's head, then kissed his hand and placed it on her belly. Then he turned and left. No one saw him again. The story in town was that he ran off with another woman, left his family in shame. My grandmother remarried, had 11 more children, and lived a hard but steady life. She never told that story until I was old enough to understand, not even to my mother or aunt, but she told me just once, and I believe her, because sometimes I dream of that howl, and when I wake up, my bones still vibrate. 3 stories, 3 survivors, each escaped death, but was not untouched. Was it trauma, possession, a curse? Or is there something else out there, something that feeds on fear and memory, something that only needs you to open the door? What if the door was never closed because they didn't bring it with them? They brought themselves to it, or did they?